Our next game, Jacksonville gets a much-needed win over the Colts, 37-34. Another shootout, a get-right performance for Trevor Lawrence, who completes 28 of 34 for 371 yards, 2 touchdowns. But I think more importantly than that, Matthew, Brian Thomas Jr. goes for over 120 yards and a touchdown. He is the legitimate number 1 wide receiver of this offense.
I know what the answer would be, but if I said to you, I want to draft starting today, and you can only pick rookies. You can only pick rookies. Jaden Daniels probably goes 1, right? Malik Neighbors probably goes 2.
Yes.
But I think there's an argument that you take Brian Thomas over Marvin Harrison Jr. at this point. Again, another bad game from Harrison. And by bad game, I mean just fantasy-wise, he just didn't put up a lot of numbers here.
2 catches, 36 yards,
right.
Something around that.
Yeah, I mean, Brian Thomas has at least 20% target share 4 to 5 games this season. He's averaging 18 yards per reception. Like, he is getting down the field, and they are chucking into him now back-to-back games with 20 or more fantasy points as Trevor Lawrence is running into form, and Trevor hasn't been exactly where we hope he would be, but still, he's been good enough to get the ball to BTJ.
Well, Jacksonville's defense stinks, so they're throwing all the time, which is helping a guy that his average yards, per route run, when you just look at his style of play with the speed, the trust he's already formed, this is going to happen all year. This isn't a hot stretch or anything fluky. Brian Thomas Jr. was such an interesting prospect because he shared an offense with Malik Neighbors, with Jaden Daniels under center, that he still had over 1,000 yards, but playing in another offense where he's the number 1, playing across from anyone else besides Malik Neighbors, he probably would have 1,500 yards as a prospect.
He's made Gabe Davis completely irrelevant as you see the Next Gen Stats there. For those of you just listening at home, it's saying the Next Gen Stats tweet says Brian Thomas Jr. reached a top speed of 22.15 miles per hour on his 85-yard touchdown reception from Trevor Lawrence. That's the fastest speed by a ball carrier this season, the fastest play by a Jaguars ball carrier in the Next Gen Stats era.
Yeah, I will say, though, he was almost eclipsed in the same game by Joe Flacco, who, by next-gen stats, allegedly flirted with Usain Bolt's Beijing 100-meter sprint record with the way that he was getting to the left sideline.
Don't you dare besmirch next-gen stats.
I'm just saying, Joe Flacco, apparently the fastest man on earth. He does move surprisingly well for a statuesque older man.
I've heard that about myself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Indeed, yeah. As we were making our way to our gate this morning, Matthew was really turning on the turbojets. I think that with Brian Thomas, look, the refrain against Brian Thomas, who, by the way, is 6th in the entire NFL in receiving yards, the refrain against him will be that he's dependent on these long touchdowns and these big long plays, which aren't as sustainable or repeatable. He's not getting like the 14 targets that Malik Neighbors will sometimes get. My refrain to that refrain would be that he's gotten completely screwed out of 2 50-yard touchdowns that he should have had. Right. The one against Ramsey in the end zone where he gets the DPI in week 1, and then Trevor Lawrence last week missed him wide open on a bomb touchdown. So, yes, I think that evens out. And, yes, 6th in receiving yards, and he's the clear number 1 option for a quarterback who Trevor Lawrence has his flaws, but he can certainly service a number 1 wide receiver.
And listen, under Doug Peterson, it is a pass-first offense. Former NFL quarterback, former Andy Reid disciple, Doug Peterson. They've always been pass-first. We'll talk about Tank Bigsby here in a second. But given their defense and their struggles, they're always going to be like a negative game script. I mean, good. They beat the Colts. Like, I mean, you know what I mean? Like
Joe Flacco.
I mean, right? I mean, the comeback player of the year, Joe Flacco. Could Joe Flacco win comeback player of the year for a second time in a row? Because he looked pretty darn good out there.
Not on any planet that I'll be living on, Matthew. I'll tell you that much right now. No.
You have too much to live for, Jay. You have young children. Stop it. Yeah, if Joe Flacco wins a second comeback player of the year, it is what it is.
There's still things to live for. There's other things to live for.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
DeMar Hamlin, 3rd year. You can bet on him in the 3rd year.
He'll get done by Mike Glennon next season when he comes back. No, I think that'll be someone else. Kirk Cousins, Nick Chubb, J.K. Dobbins, someone else, for the love of God.
Anyone.
Elsewhere in this offense.
But, yeah, I mean, Brian Thomas, I'm just trying to think that, I mean, Brian Thomas is not only, we said this last week. Last week I said he's a top 20, locked in, I don't care who he's playing every week starter. Now he might be like top 15. I mean, like he's legit. And if I was in a I don't know, I might even do this in a dynasty league, but I'm just saying, definitely in a this year, somebody offered me Marvin Harrison Jr. for Brian Thomas, I would not do it. I think I'd rather have Thomas the rest of the season than MHJ. It's close.
It is close.
But
it's going to be week by week. Well, Garrett Wilson just had 22 targets.
So probably take Garrett.
Bad week for that.
Bad
Last
week,
week, yes.
But like, we'll see what he does tonight. But like, if he has a down game tonight, like Brian Thomas over Chris Olave,
maybe
that's
rather
a really
Brian Thomas.
One.
You know, but like that's the range we're talking about. Like again, like I think if you redrafted today, he's a top 15 wide receiver.
Yeah.
Anyway.
50-1 for Offensive Rookie of the Year, which it's probably going to be
crazy,
Jaden Daniels. That price is too long, though.
Well, we talked about it last week. It's if you have a Jaden Daniels ticket you feel great about, that's your insurance ticket.
Yes.
50-1.
Especially because they're not going to, once Jaden Daniels wins MVP, like they're not going to
Somebody
want to
else
give him
has to get
someone
Rookie of
else
the
has
Year.
Offensive Rookie of the Year.
I'm not sure it'll work like
Really
that.
makes
Nobody's
sense.
giving both.
You might just get both. But
Yeah, maybe he gets both. Maybe
elsewhere in
just
this
swoops them all.
offense, Tank Bigsby has taken over the backfield. 13 carries, over 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also caught a pass for 28 yards. We got to hear from Tank after the game on a touchdown run that was just outright ridiculous.
Like sometimes when you make a big play, your mind go blank and your instincts take over. So when those opportunities come upon, like you don't know your instincts take over. So but afterwards, it come back to reality, and you get down, you see, I'm like, dang, I just scored, and you go out, I give my mom the ball, and it felt great.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Tank Bigsby, he's been one of the stories in fantasy this year in a backfield that we thought was solidified with Travis Etienne, Matthew.
He played one more snap than Travis Etienne, played 40% of the snaps. That's a season high. He has now led the Jaguars in rushing in 3 out of the 5 games this year. He's averaging 8 yards per carry. By the way, Travis Etienne, 4.4. And he leads all running backs in avoided tackle rate and yards after contact per attempt this season. Some of they're a little bit judgmenty, but to the eye test, Tank Bigsby looks like the better running back to me, Connor.
He does. He's running through tacklers. That was really his profile coming out of Auburn, was he was a guy that you wanted to grind out the tough yards. You didn't know if he'd develop as a pass catcher or if he'd be this home run hitter, but he can create his own yards past the line of scrimmage because he's tough and can run through contact. And Jaguars are obviously rewarding him, seeing that come to fruition, Jay.
Yeah, it's funny. The Coach Speak Index, which is a great Twitter follow,
Yep.
They talked about how Doug Peterson was asked if Tank Bigsby will replace Travis Etienne atop the depth chart. Peterson said, no, not at all. Travis is our guy. Tank had a good game. That's just the way games go, which is followed by the statement that Doug Peterson has a 35% reliability rating.
For sure, Doug Peterson's fighting for his job, and Tank Bigsby gives him a better chance. They're still using Etienne in the passing game, but Tank Bigsby is absolutely a thing, and I mean he's got at least 50% of this backfield share, and probably more coming.
On the other side of this game, old friend Joe Flacco drops back 44 times. He completes 33 passes, 359 yards, 3 touchdowns. Another good week for Josh Downs, Matthew. Caught 9 of 12 targets for 69 yards.
We talked about him. You talked about him last week, as you said you thought he was the best guy, on the most talented wide receiver on this team. Not even particularly close. 19 points per game over the past 2 weeks. Team high, 29% target share since he returned from injury in week 3. We think the guy's a stud, and it'll be interesting to see what happens when Richardson comes back, but as long as a professional drop-back, pure passer like Joe Flacco is under center, Downs is going to get fed.
Yeah, definitely. Look, Flacco is a excellent pocket passer. This is what he stands in the pocket and he just flings it. And when he goes up against suspect defenses like the Jags, who have the worst pass defense in the NFL statistically this season, he's going to light them up. Now, I think it's matchup dependent. If he does play against the Titans, that's a tougher matchup. The Titans
On
have
the road
sneaky
at the
good
Titans,
defense.
yep.
And he'll have Tavondre Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons coming up the middle at him. That might be a bit more difficult.
Yes.
One last thing to note from this game, why Jonathan Taylor was out. Trey Sermon was effective in fantasy, over 18 points, and a lot of that, Matthew, was the 6 catches he added.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of like feels like a running back version of Wan'Dale Robinson, right? Like he got 6 receptions for 25 yards, right? He gets 10 rushes for 38 yards, but he does get into the end zone here, as you pointed out, Jay. They're on the road at Tennessee next week. I don't really necessarily like it, but again, if Jonathan Taylor misses next week, Trey Sermon clearly the guy. Out-touched Tyler Goodson 16-8, including all 4 goal line rushes went to Trey Sermon as well. Actually got a 13% target share in this game. Joe Flacco not scared to dump it down. I don't think Trey Sermon's anything special, but I think he's, in terms of volume, serviceable. Again, tougher matchup coming up against Tennessee. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotorWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.